The midday sun poured over the quiet stretch of Main Street, painting the asphalt in a shimmering haze. Cars crawled by lazily, their tires whispering against the warm pavement. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked, sharp and impatient. To most, it was an ordinary Tuesday. To Jack Danner, it was just another day of trying to be normal. Civilian life had never fit him quite right. His hair was shorter than most men his age, his posture straighter, his eyes scanning everything like a predator measuring the wind. Years in the military had carved that into him. He wore a plain gray t-shirt and faded jeans, a battered leather jacket draped over his shoulders. His left hand carried a small paper bag from the hardware store, just screws, sandpaper, a new lock for his back door. Simple things. Normal things. The kind of errands that made him feel almost like he belonged here, in this sleepy suburban sprawl, and not back in some godforsaken desert halfway across the world. But normal had a habit of slipping through his fingers. He noticed them before they noticed him. Two men loitering across the street, young, lean, restless. The kind of restless that always meant trouble. Their clothes were casual, but their eyes were sharp. Jack clocked the bulge under one man's jacket immediately. A pistol. No holster. No training. Sloppy. Dangerous. He told himself to keep walking. He told himself it wasn't his problem. But then the taller one stepped off the curb, blocking his path. "Hey, old man," the stranger said with a smirk. "Got a minute?" Jack's grip tightened on the paper bag. His pulse slowed, not quickened. Old instincts, sharp as ever, slid into place. And just like that, Tuesday stopped being ordinary. The taller man's shadow stretched long across the sidewalk. The second one stayed behind, leaning casually against a lamppost, his eyes scanning the street, but never too far from Jack. There was a rhythm to these encounters. Jack had seen it in alleyways overseas. In marketplaces. In the narrow streets of cities where the air smelled of dust and fear. One distracts. The other watches. And somewhere unseen, a third moves into position. "Not interested," Jack said flatly. His voice didn't rise, didn't sharpen. If there was one thing he'd learned, it was that calm was a weapon. The tall one smirked. "You will be," he said. He stepped closer. Jack could smell him now, cheap cologne, sweat, and the faint metallic tang of adrenaline. It was then Jack noticed the reflection in the glass window beside them. A third man. Moving in from behind. Classic. Predictable. Deadly. Jack dropped the paper bag onto the pavement. His right hand twitched, not toward a weapon, but toward balance. Feet apart. Knees soft. The old stance came back like muscle memory etched in bone. The third man lunged. Jack pivoted. Elbow to ribs. Knee to thigh. Fast. Efficient. Over in seconds. But that's when the flash of chrome caught his eye. The second man, the one by the lamppost, was pulling a gun. And before Jack could react, before muscle could answer thought, The crack of a pistol split the air. The world went white. Pain. Searing. Deep. Like lightning set loose inside his skull. And then. Silence. Darkness pressed in from all sides. No sound. No light. Just a steady, slow thud somewhere far away. Like footsteps in an empty hall. Jack didn't know if he was dead. He didn't know if time had stopped. Or if this was just what dying felt like. Then, a faint echo. Muffled voices. Words he couldn't quite catch. Like they were speaking through water. His head was heavy. Too heavy. A dull ache spread from his forehead to the base of his neck. And then a sharper sensation, cold metal against skin. He blinked. The white glare of fluorescent light stabbed into his vision. A hospital ceiling. The faint hum of machines. The steady beep of a heart monitor. "Welcome back, Mr. Danner," a voice said. Low, calm, practiced. Jack turned his head, slowly, to see a man in a white coat, clipboard in hand. "You're lucky," the doctor continued. "Very lucky." Jack frowned. The doctor tapped his own temple with 2 fingers. "You've got a steel plate in your skull from that service injury years ago. The bullet hit it, deflected, and slowed enough to stop before it could kill you." Jack stared at him. Not sure whether to laugh or be angry. "How bad?" Jack asked, his voice rough. "Concussion. Fracture in the plate. But you'll live." Jack closed his eyes. He saw their faces again. The smirk of the tall one. The glint of the pistol in the other's hand. The split second before the world went white. He took a slow breath. The doctor thought he was calming down. But in truth, Jack was memorizing. Cataloging. Fixing every detail in place. Because the men who had tried to kill him had just made the worst mistake of their lives. The hospital smelled of antiseptic and old coffee. Jack hated both. He sat on the edge of the bed, rolling his stiff shoulders, the paper gown crinkling under him. The bullet had missed ending his life by a fraction of an inch. But the thought that kept looping in his head wasn't about survival. It was about unfinished business. The nurse came in with discharge papers. "Your scans are clear," she said softly. "You should rest, take it easy." Jack signed where she pointed. No questions. No extra words. A doctor had told him once that men like him never really healed. The scars were under the skin. Invisible. And they itched until you scratched back. He walked out into the sunlight, the hospital doors sliding shut behind him. The air felt different out here. Sharper. Alive. He didn't head home. Instead, he went downtown, where the streets were tighter, the buildings older. Places where shadows gathered even in daylight. Jack started asking questions. The right way. Quiet. Patient. Not about the shooting directly, no one talked to strangers about fresh gunfire. Instead, he asked about the kind of men who didn't belong on a sunny street at noon. Who carried themselves like predators. Who smelled of adrenaline and bad intentions. By dusk, he had a name. Not a full one, just a street handle. Reese. And the way people reacted when he said it told him everything. This wasn't just some low-level thug. This was a man with connections. And power. Jack smiled, not the kind you give a friend, but the kind you give before you go hunting. Night had settled over the city like a heavy coat. Streetlights buzzed faintly, their glow spilling over cracked sidewalks. The air smelled of fried food from the late-night vendors and the faint sting of gasoline. Jack moved with purpose. Not fast. Not slow. Just steady, the way you walk when you're not hunting yet, but you know the trail is fresh. He'd spent hours leaning on old contacts. People who owed him favors from a lifetime ago. Men who didn't scare easily, but their eyes had shifted when he said the name Reese. "You don't want that smoke, Jack," one of them had muttered over a beer. "This ain't some street punk. This guy's got layers above him. Real layers." Jack had just listened. Because he'd learned a long time ago that the moment you show curiosity, people stop talking. Now he stood at the mouth of an alley in the West District, the kind of place where deals went down and people disappeared. Somewhere deeper in, bass thumped from a club. Men smoked in clusters near the door, laughter too loud, eyes too watchful. Jack didn't walk in. He waited. Patient. Still. Predators always showed themselves if you gave them the time. And sure enough, after 20 minutes, a man stepped out, tall, wiry, a sharp jaw, leather jacket, tattoos snaking up his neck. He spoke briefly to someone in the doorway, then lit a cigarette. Jack recognized him instantly from the hospital bed flashbacks. One of the shooters. Not Reese. But close enough to smell him. Jack's hand slid into his jacket pocket. Not for a gun. For the small, battered notebook he always carried. He wrote down the man's face in words only he would understand, shorthand from his service days. Then he smiled to himself. The hunt was officially on. The man didn't know he was being followed. That was good. Because Jack had spent half his life learning how to be invisible. He kept 2 car lengths back when the man got into a beat-up black sedan. The tail lights glowed faint red in the darkness, bobbing slightly with each pothole in the road. Jack's breathing was slow, his grip on the steering wheel loose. A calm kind of focus, the kind he'd had on recon missions when everything depended on patience. The sedan turned off Main, weaving into narrower streets, then stopped outside an old warehouse near the docks. The place was quiet, too quiet for the waterfront. Jack parked 2 blocks away and continued on foot. The air was damp, salt-heavy, seagulls crying in the dark. From the shadows of a loading bay, he watched the man walk to a side door and knock, 3 quick raps, a pause, then 2 more. A code. The door opened, spilling a slice of yellow light across the wet concrete. Jack caught a glimpse inside, shelves stacked with crates, men moving with purpose, voices low but tense. Not a street gang. Too organized. Too clean. His gut tightened. This was bigger. Much bigger. He stayed until the door shut again, then slowly backed into the dark. The smell of oil and old rope clung to the night air. And in Jack's mind, one thought burned bright. He wasn't just hunting a man anymore. He was about to walk straight into a war. Morning brought a pale, washed-out sky over the docks. The kind of light that made everything look tired. Even the gulls sounded bored as they circled above. Jack parked a few blocks away again, trading his leather jacket for a faded work shirt and cap. He looked like any other dockhand killing time before a shift. The warehouse from last night loomed ahead, weathered brick, metal siding rusting at the seams. A sign half-fallen read Harlan Shipping Company. He watched from across the street. Men came and went, most dressed in plain clothes, a few in coveralls. But none of them moved like dock workers. Their steps were too light. Their eyes too sharp. One man in particular caught Jack's attention, short, stocky, with a limp. He carried a clipboard and barked orders in a voice that carried across the yard. The others moved when he spoke. Fast. Obedient. Jack crossed the street casually, heading toward a small diner that faced the warehouse. Inside, the air smelled of burnt coffee and fried eggs. The waitress barely looked at him as she poured a cup. It was the old man in the corner booth who did. His eyes lingered a second too long. Then he gave the smallest nod toward the window, where the warehouse stood in plain view. "You watching them too?" the old man asked quietly. Jack didn't answer right away. "Depends who's asking." The old man's mouth twisted in something that wasn't quite a smile. "Name's McCready. And if you're smart, you'll stay the hell away from Harlan Shipping." Jack took a slow sip of coffee, his eyes never leaving McCready's. "That's the problem. I'm not feeling very smart these days." McCready stirred his coffee slowly. The spoon scraped the inside of the mug with a soft, steady rhythm. It wasn't nerves, it was habit. "I used to wear their colors," he said finally, his voice low enough that even the waitress couldn't hear. Jack didn't blink. Just let the silence pull the truth out. "They're not dock rats," McCready continued. "They're a pipeline. Guns in, cash out, and a whole lot of blood to grease the gears." He took a sip, his hand trembling just a fraction. "FBI's been circling them for years, but they can't get close. Too many shells, too many fronts." Jack leaned forward. "So who's at the top?" McCready's eyes shifted to the warehouse outside, like the name itself might call down trouble. "They called him Reese." Jack's jaw tightened. McCready noticed. "You've got a reason to hate him." It wasn't a question. "I've got a reason to bury him," Jack replied. McCready looked away, staring at the steam rising from his cup. "If you go after him, you won't come back." "I didn't." Jack let that hang in the air for a moment, then stood. Leaving a few bills on the table, he said only one thing before walking out. "Then I'll make sure I do." Jack spent the next 3 days watching. No moves. No contact. Just eyes on the warehouse and the streets around it. Patterns started to form. Trucks came twice a week at night, never the same drivers. But in the middle of the day, there was always one constant, a silver van with tinted windows. The man driving it was lean, young, dressed too well for dock work. Always with a duffel bag, sometimes two. He'd pull up, step inside for no more than 10 minutes, then leave. Jack followed once, keeping 3 cars back. The van didn't head toward any storefront or safe house. It went uptown, expensive streets, glass towers, polished lobbies. The driver dropped the bags off in a building with private security and drove away without looking back. Jack stayed just long enough to watch a man in a suit collect the bags and disappear inside. Money laundering. By the time Jack was back at his motel, the plan had started to take shape in his head. The courier was the weak point. No heavy guards, no backup teams. Just one man with too much to carry and no reason to expect trouble. Jack opened his battered notebook and wrote a single line. "Tomorrow night, take the van." Night settled over the city like a wet blanket. The streets near the docks were half empty, slick with rain. Street lamps buzzed and flickered, casting broken halos on the asphalt. Jack waited in his car 2 blocks from the warehouse. Engine off, lights out. The silver van pulled up right on time. The courier stepped out, hood up, a duffel in each hand. He moved fast, head down against the drizzle. 10 minutes in the warehouse. Then he was back in the van, heading toward uptown. Jack tailed him for 6 blocks, then cut down an alley, looping ahead. He knew the route now. Knew the blind curve where the streetlights never worked. The van came around the bend, and Jack was there. His car blocking the road, hazard lights blinking. The courier slowed, rolled down the window. "Hey, move your..." That's when Jack yanked the door open and dragged him out into the rain. A quick jab to the ribs, a twist of the arm, and the courier was face down on the pavement. Jack popped the van's rear doors. Inside, 2 duffels stuffed with cash, and beneath them, a smaller bag. Guns, neatly wrapped in oilcloth. And tucked into the side pocket, a folded sheet of paper. Jack opened it under the glow of the hazard lights. One name at the top in bold type. Rees, V. And under it, drop locations, dates, amounts. Jack let the paper flutter back into the bag. For the first time, the war had a map. Jack spent the next day memorizing the list. Each location was a piece of the machine. He needed to know which one would bleed the most if it was cut. One address stood out, an abandoned service garage on the outskirts. Remote, no neighbors, easy to guard. The kind of place you only used if you didn't want anyone asking questions. He arrived just after sunset, keeping his distance, watching through binoculars from the tree line. 2 SUVs outside, men smoking near the door. They had rifles slung over their shoulders, not for show. Through a cracked window, Jack saw more inside, crates stacked high, men moving with the bored efficiency of routine. One crate split open during unloading, revealing what looked like military-grade rifles. Jack's pulse slowed. This was bigger than street gangs. Bigger than Reese alone. He waited until one of the smokers stepped away toward the dark edge of the lot. Silent as shadow, Jack moved in. A hand over the mouth, a quick chokehold, the man went limp. Jack slipped inside. Two men were arguing over a manifest sheet, backs to him. The third turned too late. Jack's elbow caught his jaw, dropping him instantly. The fight was quick, brutal, and over in less than a minute. Jack smashed a crate open, grabbed a rifle, and took photos of the serial numbers with his phone. Evidence. Proof. But as he stepped back into the cool night air, headlights cut across the lot. More vehicles. Men spilling out with weapons raised. Jack dove into the shadows as the shouting started. The war had just come looking for him. Jack hit the ground running. Boots splashing through puddles, breath sharp in the cold air. Behind him, shouts, the metallic click of rifles being chambered. The industrial yard was a maze of rusted containers and towering stacks of pallets. He zigzagged through them, forcing his pursuers to split. One wrong turn and he'd be boxed in. Rounds cracked past his ear, shattering wood, sending splinters into his face. Jack didn't slow. He vaulted a low fence, ducked behind a dumpster, and pulled the phone from his pocket. The photos, rifles, manifests, the name Reese, sent to a secure Dropbox used by an old contact in the bureau. No time for explanations. Just proof. Footsteps closed in. Jack slid out the other side, moving toward the chain-link fence at the yard's edge. It was topped with barbed wire. He climbed anyway, ignoring the sting as metal teeth bit into his hands. A black SUV screeched around the corner beyond the fence. Jack hit the ground on the other side and sprinted into the dark streets, weaving between parked trucks. Engines roared behind him. Finally, he slid into a narrow drainage tunnel and dropped to his knees, disappearing into the stink and shadows. Water ran cold around his boots. Above, the sound of tires and angry voices faded into the night. Jack leaned against the damp concrete, catching his breath. The bureau had the evidence now. But the organization knew his face. And that meant the clock had started ticking. The motel room smelled of stale coffee and rain-soaked clothes. Jack sat on the edge of the bed, rifle leaning against the nightstand. The knock came just after dawn, 3 short, too long. He opened the door to find Special Agent Karen Holt. Tall, sharp eyes, hair tied back in a no-nonsense knot. They hadn't spoken in years. "You really know how to get my attention," she said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. Jack closed the door. "I sent you what I found," he said. "You got it?" Holt nodded, setting her phone on the table. "The rifles are military issue, stolen from an armory in Nevada 6 months ago. Reese's name on the drop sheets is the first hard link we've had to him in 2 years." Jack leaned forward, then arrest him. Holt's gaze didn't waver. It's not that simple. Reese is insulated. Layers of middlemen. We move too early. The whole case collapses. Jack's jaw tightened. I'm not waiting while he hides behind lawyers and gunmen. Holt slid a small envelope across the table. Then don't. But understand this, after last night, you're not just a problem for him, you're the problem. He'll throw everything at you until you're gone. Jack opened the envelope. Inside, photos, maps, names. Unofficial intelligence. This never happened, Holt said, already moving toward the door. Jack looked down at the papers, feeling the weight of the war shift in his hands. Now he had a way in. The city slept under a thin veil of fog. Jack moved like a shadow through the narrow backstreets of East Harbor. His target, Vico Mendez, one of Reese's top lieutenants. The man handled overseas shipments and had a habit of working late in his waterfront office. Jack had spent the day studying the maps Holt gave him. There was a service door at the rear, used by cleaners and delivery drivers. No cameras, no alarms, just a deadbolt. A quick twist of the pick and Jack was inside. The air smelled of salt water and machine oil. A faint hum of refrigeration units filled the hall. 2 guards sat in a cramped security room, eyes on muted TV screens. Jack slipped behind them, a swift strike to the neck dropping the first, a chokehold silencing the second. He moved deeper, following the glow of a desk lamp. Vico was there, hunched over a ledger, cigarette dangling from his lips. The man didn't hear the door until Jack had already crossed the floor. The fight was quick. Vico went down with a blow to the temple. Jack bound his hands, gagged him, and searched the desk. Stacks of shipping documents, coded invoices, and a flash drive. Jack pocketed the drive, took a few photos of the ledgers, and was gone before the first patrol car turned down the street. Fog swallowed him whole as he vanished into the night. The room was lit only by the pale glow of Jack's laptop. Rain tapped against the window, a slow, steady rhythm. The flash drive sat in the USB port, its contents spilling across the screen in a series of encrypted files. Jack's fingers moved quickly, feeding the data through a decryption program he'd learned in the service. One by one, the locked folders began to open. Inside, shipping manifests, bank transfers, offshore account numbers. But what made him pause were the names. Not just gang lieutenants or hired guns. These were senators, city officials, even a federal judge. All tied to Reese through shell companies and consulting fees. Jack leaned back in his chair, the weight of the revelation pressing down on him. This wasn't just organized crime. It was organized power. He knew what this meant. Reese wasn't hiding from the law, he was protected by it. If the wrong people saw this too soon, it would disappear. Jack pulled out his phone, opening a secure line to Holt. When she answered, her voice was tight. "You have something?" "I have the whole thing," Jack said. "But if we play it wrong, it dies in a file cabinet forever." A long pause on the line. "Then we play it very carefully," Holt replied. And the call went dead. The cafe was nearly empty. A few night owls lingered over their coffee, heads buried in newspapers or glowing phone screens. Jack sat at the corner table, his back to the wall, eyes on the rain-smeared window. At precisely 23:15, Karen Holt walked in. Her coat was soaked, hair clinging to her face. She didn't go to the counter, she came straight to him and slid into the seat opposite. "You're late," Jack said quietly. "Traffic," she replied, but her eyes told a different story. Something was wrong. "You were followed?" Holt didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached into her bag and placed a small, battered recorder on the table. She pressed play. A voice came through, deep, smooth, dangerous. "If Holden thinks he can take this to the bureau, he's mistaken. We have friends there, important friends. Make sure he's silenced." Jack recognized the name. Holden was a journalist who'd been chasing Reese for years. "He's dead, isn't he?" Jack asked. Holt's silence was the only answer he needed. "That's why we can't take this upstairs," she said finally. "You were right, this is bigger than one gang. It's a network. Judges, politicians, law enforcement. Reese is the tip of the spear." Jack leaned forward, voice low. "Then we cut off the arm holding the spear, one piece at a time." Holt hesitated, then slid a folded map across the table. "Here, safe houses, stash locations, transport routes, all the places Reese uses to move product and money. You hit these quietly. It'll hurt him bad, but it'll also light up every alarm bell he has." Jack studied the map. Every mark was a target. Every target was a message. The rain outside thickened, drumming against the glass. Jack folded the map, tucked it into his jacket. "First we hurt him," Jack said. "Then we take him." Holt's gaze was steady. "I'll feed you intel where I can, but if they catch you, I don't know you." Jack stood, leaving enough cash on the table to cover their untouched coffees. As he walked into the rain, the city lights blurred, and for the first time in months, he felt the hunt truly begin. The fog rolled in thick from the bay. Salt clung to the air, mixing with the faint tang of diesel fuel. From the shadow of an abandoned crane, Jack watched the warehouse, 3 guards at the main entrance, one pacing near the loading dock. He adjusted the suppressor on his rifle, the metal clicking softly in the night. Through the scope, he caught the guard's face under the yellow light of a flickering lamp. One breath in. One breath out. The guard dropped soundlessly, his rifle clattering to the wet concrete. Jack moved, low and fast, boots splashing through shallow puddles. He slipped past the first corner just as a truck rumbled into view, its headlights cutting through the fog. 2 more guards stepped out to greet the driver. Jack took them down before they could finish their sentences. Inside, the warehouse was a cathedral of steel and shadows. Rows of crates stacked high, the smell of oil and gunpowder hanging heavy. Somewhere above, an engine coughed to life, a forklift, moving cargo deeper inside. Jack planted the first charge under a crate marked with foreign customs stamps. The second went under a metal rack of rifles. The third, at the base of a stairwell leading to the offices. Footsteps echoed. A flashlight beam swept across the floor. Two men in Reese's colors appeared from the gloom, pistols drawn. Jack dove behind a stack of crates as bullets punched into the wood. He returned fire, 2 short bursts, 2 bodies hitting the ground. The forklift's engine roared again, now closer. Jack popped up, sending a shot through the driver's chest. The machine shuddered, metal squealing as it crashed into a wall of crates. With the path clear, he climbed the stairwell, kicking open the office door. Inside, stacks of documents, maps, and a ledger thick with names and numbers. He stuffed what he could into his pack, glancing once more at the clock. 2 minutes until detonation. Jack sprinted for the back exit, slipping into the night as the first blast tore through the warehouse. A rolling wave of heat and sound hit him, followed by 2 more explosions in rapid succession. Flames climbed into the fog, casting long, dancing shadows across the docks. Somewhere in the distance, sirens wailed. Jack didn't look back. He just kept running, the pack heavy with stolen secrets. The night swallowed Jack as he cut through the alleyways. Rain slicked the pavement, reflecting the orange glow of the burning docks in the distance. His boots pounded against the ground, each step echoing in the narrow corridors of brick and steel. Behind him, voices shouted, harsh, clipped, full of urgency. The hunt had begun. A black SUV screeched into the mouth of the alley ahead, tires screaming. Doors flew open, and 3 men spilled out with rifles. Jack didn't slow, he dropped to one knee, firing twice. 1 man collapsed, the second staggered, the third dove for cover. A burst of automatic fire chewed through the brick inches from Jack's head. He rolled to the side, snapped off 2 more shots, and the alley was his again. But there was no time to breathe. 2 more vehicles roared into the street, headlights blinding. Bullets sparked against the wet asphalt as Jack darted between dumpsters and old delivery crates. He spotted an old motorcycle chained near a back door. With a swift kick, the chain snapped, the engine coughed once, then roared to life. Jack tore into the main street, weaving between traffic as horns blared. In the rearview, 2 black sedans swerved after him. One tried to cut him off. Jack leaned hard into the turn, skidding inches from a lamppost, the bike's tires screaming against the wet road. Gunfire erupted again, glass shattering in storefronts as pedestrians scattered. Jack reached under his jacket, pulled a small flash grenade from his vest, and tossed it behind him. The street exploded in a blinding burst of white light. The first sedan slammed into a parked car, the second fishtailed, losing control. For a moment, the road ahead was his, until a third SUV burst from a side street, ramming his bike from the side. Jack was thrown, rolling hard across the asphalt. Pain flared through his shoulder, but he forced himself up, sprinting toward the nearest building. A door stood ajar, he shoved it open, plunging into the dark interior of an old parking garage. Headlights followed, sweeping through the concrete pillars as engines closed in. Jack dove behind a sedan, bullets sparking off the hood. He spotted his chance, a black sports car idling near the far exit, its driver slumped unconscious. Probably drunk, probably unlucky. Jack yanked the door open, shoved the driver out, and slammed the gear into drive. Tires screamed, the engine roared, and he shot out of the garage like a bullet. In the mirror, The SUVs gave chase again. But this time, Jack wasn't running. He swerved into a narrow side street, knowing exactly where it led, and exactly how it would end for anyone following. The industrial zone was a skeleton of rusted machinery and forgotten buildings. Moonlight cast long shadows across cracked concrete and twisted metal. Jack knew every inch of this place. It was where he'd grown up before the war. He slowed the car at the entrance, headlights off, blending into the darkness. Behind him, the echo of engines grew louder, the SUVs were closing in. Jack's breath came steady, controlled. He pulled a small device from the glove box, a homemade EMP charger. He flicked it on, and the garage's old fluorescent light sputtered, then died. The SUVs hesitated, their headlights flickering and going dark. Jack's moment had come. He climbed out, rifle slung low. The concrete pillars and broken walls became his allies. He fired low shots that ricocheted, sending echoes down the empty corridors. The men chasing him scattered, unsure where the shots were coming from. Jack moved silently, setting tripwires with small explosives he'd planted days before. Each wire connected to a cluster of barrels filled with fuel. One guard rounded a corner too fast and triggered a wire. A sudden blast tore through the silence, throwing him into the shadows. The SUVs tried to regroup, but every step forward was met with fire and smoke. Jack's traps turned the zone into a gauntlet of chaos. Flames licked the walls, thick black smoke blotted out the moon. Men screamed, curses filling the air. Jack kept moving, eyes sharp for any sign of Reese's men. He spotted the last SUV stuck in the mud near a collapsed fence. Men scrambled to free it, but Jack was already on them. 2 shots, precise and quick. Bodies hit the ground. The last survivor raised his hands, eyes wide with fear. Jack leveled his rifle. "Where's Reese?" The man swallowed hard. "Safe house, abandoned mill, North River." Jack nodded. "Good." He walked away as sirens began to wail in the distance. Help was coming, but so was the endgame. The war was almost over. The dawn crept in slow and gray. Jack stood at the edge of the North River, eyes fixed on the abandoned mill silhouetted against the fog. Every muscle ached, every breath burned. But there was no turning back. The weight of the past years pressed on him, the bullet lodged in his skull, the pain, the betrayals. His family lost to the shadows Reese cast, promises broken, trust shattered. He tightened his grip on the rifle, feeling the cold steel bite into his palms. "I'm not the same man I was," he whispered to himself. "But I'm the one who's going to finish this." The door to the mill creaked open, Reese stepped out, flanked by armed guards. Calm, cruel eyes locked onto Jack's. "So, the dog finally comes to bite," Reese said, voice dripping with mockery. Jack's jaw tightened. "You hide behind power and money, but it ends here." Reese laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "You don't get to end anything, soldier. You're just a wound to be cleaned." Gunfire erupted, the night shattered by the crack of rifles and the staccato of pistols. Jack moved like a shadow, firing, dodging, every shot a promise. Inside, the fight was chaos, echoes of explosions, shouts, pain. Jack caught a glimpse of Reese trying to slip away through a back door. He gave chase, heart pounding like a drum in his chest. The final room was a maze of crates and broken machinery. Reese stood waiting, a pistol raised. Their eyes met, hatred and regret tangled in the silence between shots. Jack dove, bullets ripping past him. He rolled, aimed, fired. Reese staggered, clutching his side. "You think this changes anything?" Reese gasped. Jack stepped forward, steady now, rifle trained on the man who'd haunted his life. "Yes," Jack said quietly. "For everyone you've hurt." Sirens wailed closer. Reese's guards were down, the network beginning to crumble. Jack lowered his rifle slightly. "It's over." And for the first time in years, Jack felt something he hadn't in a long time: peace. As the authorities flooded in, Jack looked out over the river. The war was done. And he had survived.